Hey everyone. Now, I want to come back and continue talking about the part of my life where I've been going to these visionary state or having these visionary slips. And these are sneaky little buggers, let me tell you what. In my recent conversations, I was talking about the time I went to see Frontline Assembly in 99. And so one of those things was the guitar player. I expected to see Jed on stage, which is a guy with long hair, maybe a little facial hair, and instead, there was a guy named Charlie who I didn't know yet, and this is somebody I was going to meet later on. So eventually, I meet Charlie. Now, I think at this point, I had my friend Lynn and Jeremy staying with me, and we were trying to save up and move into a better apartment. So we're all staying together in this little studio, and that's because I got along good enough with these guys. We could all live that close, right? At any rate, they're going to the club, just trying to find things to do to get out of the house. And so they're going over to the Snake Pit, which had like a goth night. Maybe there's a couple other times you go over there that has appropriate music. But anyways, they started hanging out with Charlie and bringing him home. And at first, I thought I recognized him from Frontline Assembly. And he says he doesn't know those guys. He's never been on stage with them. And after a while, he caught on that I don't believe him. I kind of thought he was lying about it. And so he was sort of playing along. So he's kind of a pain in the ass, actually. So we actually, me and Charlie ended up living together for a little bit, but we parted ways in a bad way because he's a jerk, okay? Charlie was a jerk. Now, I have my notes over here, so I hope I don't forget anything. I wanted to talk about meeting Charlie because that's, again, where the visionary slips get me, and I thought Charlie was a friend of Bill. Now, the next person I meet, Jason, he's a friend of Jason, and I think they had a keyboard player named Jason on tour with them in 98, so I don't know if he was talking about that guy or their drummer, Jason, so two guys named Jason in one band. Ha! And then, so I was going to the Snake Pit, and I met this guy, and I can't think of his name. He had like a Polish name. It's kind of hard to remember. But I must have had on like a Frontline Assembly shirt or a Delirium shirt. I don't know what it was, but we started talking a little bit. And he was trying to invite me over to his place, someplace like off of like Logan and Alameda in Denver there. And it's interesting because this area was brought up a couple different times. Like when I was on I'm So Sexy, I had this guy Bill that I thought was one of the owners. So he was coming online and he had a camera set up. And it didn't make sense. I mean, he's one of the owners, but he wasn't showing his face, and he was stating that he was down in that area as well, around Alameda and Logan. So that came up again in a later conversation that somebody had a studio down in that area where Bill Leeb was going to do some work. So this location's come up a few times. So this is just an example of how we get these little hints and seeds. Anyway, so this guy, let's see, I may have run into him later as well. So I went to some party later. I'll share about that, where I was looking for a Bill Leeb, and I thought I saw this guy there. And he may have even spoke to me at the moment, and I can't remember what it was. But just the fact that he came up a few times, and like most recently after I moved to Big Fork, I think 2010, I was put in touch with Bill Leeb. And in one of those conversations, he asked me if I remembered this guy. And it's important because I still wonder to this day, kind of like I thought, well, what if Charlie's a friend of Bill's coming over to my house, to kind of help things along? Well, this guy is one where I wonder if maybe I should have went home with him, like he invited me. Maybe he was inviting me over there to meet Bill Leeb, So this is like where, I might look delusional and stuff like that. This is kind of confusing, but it was just interesting that, these couple things. So what I'm pointing out is like seeing Charlie on stage was a visionary slip. He was kind of a false connection, but this other guy with the name I can't remember, he could have been a true connection. And so I was kind of getting the idea that I'd been put in touch with Bill Leeb a couple times, or there were people trying to help us do it without anyone noticing. So anyways, I mentioned to him that I'm flying my dad into town. So funny thing is, Frontline Assembly, they just toured November of 98. They were in Denver. And in April of 99, they were back again. And so this has started to make me wonder about what Rosie was trying to tell me. Like my soulmate would be on stage and he would be yelling something kind of meant for me to hear, but it would be getting drowned out, you know. And so that's where I started wondering if there's any truth in that. And he's trying to start another little tour, like he just put like a few dates on there to include Denver. Maybe he's trying to make a connection. I was kind of wondering that by this point, you know, if he was trying to make a connection. At any rate, I mentioned to this friend of Jason, you know, that I had some trouble the last couple times Frontline Assembly came to town, and I thought if I bring my dad into town to talk to Bill Leeb, he's going to have better luck, because I feel like just being a young woman and all that stuff, it's a big part of what's making it hard for me to talk to him, you know, without it turning into a whole, oh, there's the girl trying to get Bill Leeb in bed and all that stuff, right? So hopefully they don't try to say my dad was trying to get Bill Leeb in bed. At any rate, I flew my dad into town, and we went to see the show. And and so that's when we went to Wax Trax Records, and he bought me like a psychic TV compilation that had like a collage of pussy. So it's kind of funny that somebody would give their daughter something like that. But that's where, you know, either it was my pussy or I had a visionary slip caused to make me think so. So it was meant to make me think so. And so I think at first glance I felt paranoid, you know, that so I started thinking, I wonder if my dad's in cahoots with this. At some point I started wondering if my dad knew what was going on and participating, because he was like he must have knew to get me that record, you know. Like, oh no, I felt embarrassed because I didn't want my dad to know about it, so by him buying that for me made me wonder if he knew about it. So that's one of those funny things I thought I'd mention. But I think real quickly, you know, since we went to see Xymox, my dad took some pictures of my costume. Now, I was anticipating going to see Frontline Assembly, so I wanted to do tiger style, right? So I'm a Shantung Black Tiger, and I'm a Grand Master. That's why I've got the red belt on. See, I even put on long silver nails. Now, that's my friend Chris Smith. I'm going to be going to Denver to stay with him if I make it there this summer. So we've been friends since like 97. And at this point, so Halloween 99, he was living close by. And so here's the funny thing about me getting ready for this show. I go in the bathroom, I just start smearing that white paint all over myself. I was just wearing a tank top and putting all this on. And I could hear my dad in the other room talking to my friend Chris going, oh man, I don't want to go someplace with that freak. He just thought it looked terrible. But then when I finished up, see, then he's like, hey, that's pretty cool. So he really appreciated it once I was done. All right. Let's try to be careful not to go too quickly. And so, by the way, you know, I got Chris to join Kung Fu, and he's got his black belt, and so he and I have put in a significant amount of time sparring together. Lots of good maulings back in the day, I tell you. But yeah, that was a good concert, even though Frontline Assembly bailed on us. Me, my dad, and Chris all went to see Frontline Assembly. And, not Frontline Assembly. We went to see Xymox. Let me get that straight. So Xymox came, and I think their singer, Ronnie, and their bass player, I'm not sure who she was, but it looked like they were talking and pointing in my direction, like they noticed my costume. So I was really honored that the singer from Xymox noticed us, you know. So I would say noticed me, but but I wanted to be a tiger for Frontline Assembly, you know, because I like to do my kung fu, and I just feel like there's so much good tiger in Frontline Assembly. Like somebody once asked me, you know, what's the difference between Frontline Assembly and Skinny Puppy? I said, well, you know, as a kung fu student, I would say Frontline Assembly is more Tiger Crane, and Skinny Puppy's more Drunken Dragon, right? That was fun going to see Xymox. I'm really glad we made it. But yeah, man, it just my whole plan was to get my dad to come up and talk to Bill Leeb, so it felt like it was a waste of energy, but we still had a fun time. So maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a blessing in disguise. So anyways, I had a colorful visionary slip while my dad was visiting. Now my dad told me a story about the time he went to prison. In reality, he did go to prison. And so in the story, there was the leader of the Austrian Mafia was in prison. And he found out that my dad was a very intelligent guy and he liked to read a lot of books. And now that's another thing that's true about my dad, is he does like to read quite a bit. So very intellectual kind of guy. And not only that, but my dad's very knowledgeable of the World War I and II and the whole Nazi stuff, you know. So that's his area of interest, what he likes to study up. So in the story, this mafia leader wanted to get my dad out of prison, and also wanted him to have was hoping he would have a baby girl to marry his grandson someday, right? So that kind of ties in with the early story about this what you call the general of an Austrian Mafia, who was also a time traveler. So it makes you wonder if this is his grandpa, you know. If there's so kind of confusing stuff. It's like, again, it's a visionary slip where it sounds like my dad's talking about his actual stay in prison. So I started getting a little concerned, you know, like maybe my dad does know what's going on. But then later on, when I realized it was a visionary slip, I started thinking this could be to do with past life stuff, past life connections. Like, say, I have this theory that a lot of people that are making industrial music or feel a connection to it, these could be veteran souls who have died in the world wars, you know, World War I and World War II, you know. And that in this incarnation, our karma with industrial music has a lot to do with the healing of the soul. So, you know, just a colorful theory that I have. And that's where I wonder, hey, you know, what if my father died in the Nazi wars? Or what if maybe Bill Leeb has either been in the Nazi wars in his past life, you know, may have died in the wars, and there was a Nazi known as Wilhelm Leeb. Is that Bill Lieb's actual grandfather or relative, or is that just somebody that Bill Leeb got a stage name from? So still a little vague on that, right? So anyways, after my dad went home, I can't remember exactly what day one. It seemed like I immediately went into a much bigger visionary slip, and this is one that I've been really looking forward to talking about. So I just kind of want to recap on what I've had to share here. And that when I went to see Frontline Assembly in '99, I had a visionary slip where I was introduced to Charlie. We actually made friends. We've even ended up living together, but he was not actually affiliated with Frontline Assembly. So the next person I was to meet says he was a friend of Jason, possibly the keyboard player I talked to back in '98, because I mentioned to him that I was interested in joining Frontline Assembly, actually. So he said that he was the only person who didn't play aloof. He was the only person who was not aloof at that point. And then thought he was important because he could have been somebody who was really affiliated with Bill Leeb, and that if I had taken his invitation, what if they were trying to introduce us or bring us together without anyone noticing? The next thing, my dad coming into town and buying me that CD, you know, that definitely planted a seed of paranoia. What if my dad knows what's going on? And if anything, I really didn't want him to know about the I'mSoSexy.com, so that was embarrassing to think he might have known about it. But then when I had a visionary slip with my father, that's when he said he went to prison, and the mafia, the leader of the Austrian Mafia wanted to get him out. Now, when I told my dad about this later on, I let him know that I realized it was a visionary slip, but this is what it told me. He said, you know, that's very interesting because there may have been a point that Hitler went to prison. So, and if this isn't correct, that could just be another, you know, one of those visionary slips. But this seemed like it was happening in reality, where he thought my story was interesting because maybe, you know, Hitler did go to prison and he tried to help people out of prison that he thought were worthy for his cause, you know. So, the Austrian Mafia was a nickname given to Hitler's army, you know, because he was actually an Austrian man himself. So anyways, just another colorful way that information is given to me, and sometimes truth truthfully and sometimes not so truthfully. Like Charlie was never part of Frontline Assembly, but he was used to kind of confuse me and make me feel like he's somebody that was lying to me. And he was kind of contributing to the confusion, so he was perfect for that job if that's what it was meant to do. At any rate, I know this is kind of a long, confusing story, but as we go on, I think I'm going to be able to kind of string it all together. So I'm just kind of laying these points down, but at some point, the points all kind of come together really well. So again, I've been going to Visionary State. I'm kind of interested in finding out exactly who I'm talking to and what the purpose is. At this point, you're thinking it's as if it's a spiritual attack, like it was really meant to drive me crazy or trigger people to lay into me. I got a lot of people to yell at me and make me feel crazy by going through this, being in this moment. But in hindsight, this could be an education about what Visionary State is and how it works, and what makes it so relevant is it's popular discussion at the moment. Is Armageddon really going to happen? Are Bible prophecies going to come true? And the answer to that is the spirit world, or like even myself. So I'm not even in the spirit world. I guess, I'm a physical person. So even I've been able to see glimpses of the future. So if there are beings operating on a higher level, or if we're being reached by the spirit world, they can see the potentiality. So if the Bible's telling us something, like if that's like the prophecies that somebody with intuition is sharing, I'm not saying that Armageddon is going to happen necessarily, but being able to have prophetic visions is very possible, and I've experienced that for myself. But in my case, they're only partly true, so we can take stuff that's true and not true and confuse it together. And that's what we got to be careful about. Discernment is, where are these messages coming from before we start to act on them, before like one country starts to attack another country, or before one person goes to introduce himself to another person with any such expectations, right? So it could be a very individual issue, and it could be a very worldly issue. And that's why I think it's worth talking about the Visionary State. Again, I feel like maybe sharing my personal life can get a little bit boring, but I think at the end of the story, I really want us to put together how going into Visionary State and how it can affect our decision making and the actions we take is super important. Because again, we come back to universal law and natural law, recognizing that we are part of conscious presence, and that conscious presence is a force in nature that contributes greatly to the outcome of reality. That's why we got to understand, how we're communicating, what's being communicated, what's the purpose for it, and how should we act on it. So on a global level, the Visionary State exists. Yes, it does, absolutely. And again, it's just information, and it's up to you to use your best judgment on how you're going to act on it. And so in my case, dealing with Bill Leeb, what I've tried to do in the long run is I've tried to make friends with him and be at peace with him, because at some point I've wondered if this was meant to kind of make me hate him or see him as a problem, and so the way I'm fighting it is to, not fighting it, but doing the right thing by just trying to be friends. Like, here I am, this has been my experience, and if anything, I'm not close friends of him. He knows who I am. He's heard from me, but I like to think we're on good terms with each other. So as I share out these stories, again, these are things that have happened 25 years ago, and I just feel like it's important to point this out, just because I feel like I was going on to Mind Phaser, and I was getting angry and saying things out of anger, and so this sounds like I'm always talking shit about Bill Leeb. Well, if you understand what I've been through, then you can understand why all this happened. So that's why I've been being very careful to explain some of these details, and most importantly that regardless of what I'm going to say, that Bill Leeb is somebody that I value greatly, and somebody who is always welcome in my life and stuff like that. So like And I know I sound like I'm crazy, but again, that's why I've been explaining how the visionary state works, that there are a number of things that you could say I have mental health issues to work out, but these are two separate things, you know? So I think most people, if they've been put through a similar experience, I don't know if they can handle it as well as I have. So I like to think that I've also learned what my strengths are. So maybe my mental health is still good enough that even this wasn't able to stop me or completely ruin my life. At any rate, I really appreciate having gone to the visionary state and finding out that it does exist, and there are some more colorful things I'm going to be sharing later. So you guys have a great day, and if you're still listening to me babbling after all this time, appreciate it. You're definitely the person I need to talk to. So I'll talk to you soon, and you have a fun day.